welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the first edition of 2025 for Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And I had to take some time off. I just, admittedly, even after the election and what have you, we had some shows, but I have to tell you, it's been tough. It's been kind of tough. So, but what we cannot do is to give up or to have a defeatist attitude or to think that there's nothing that we can do to change things. We have to resist and we have to buckle up and put our game faces on and march forward. All right. Our ancestors dealt with even worse than this, and we know what's coming ahead, but that's okay because collectively, we can resist and do better, even in the midst of chaos and confusion. So let me introduce you to our fellow resistors tonight. Okay, hello, Lynette. Nice to see you. Thank you. All right. So first up, I have from Detroit, Michigan, Clyde Allen Jr. He is a business owner in the Motown. Go check out his business, Pop's Place. It's the place to be for the best sandwiches, subs, sausages, and fried chicken and all that's good to eat. He's located at 13200 Dexter Avenue, Suite D in the Motor City. Welcome back to the show, Clyde.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back, Pam.
Absolutely. Okay. And next we have attorney Narissa Smith. Narissa is also a professor of law, and she is now an author. A former professor of law, but still, listen, once a teacher, always an educator, right? Just like Latrice is forever a journalist, despite what she's doing now. So Narissa has actually taught constitutional law, which is going to be important to our conversation. And she is a Black history scholar. She's got a new book out entitled Fight for Equality, Racial Justice in North America. And you can purchase it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and where fine books are sold. And if you had sent me a graphic, I would have put it up because I wanted to do that for Clyde as well. You are welcome. Next, we have Zachary Clipper Sr. Zach has worked in TV production and in customer relations with a national grocery chain. He is a Pan-Africanist who believes in the unification of the Black diaspora. Zach worked very hard on the Harris Waltz campaign, but he's still a trooper, right? Welcome back to the show, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay. And next we have Latrice Davis. She is a senior court clerk at Queens County Criminal Court and serves in a leadership role on Queens Community Board number 6. Latrice is a former journalist, but once a journalist, you're always a journalist, with the Associated Press. Welcome back to the show, Latrice.
As always, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks again. I look forward to the conversation tonight.
All right. And next is my favorite Gen Zer and the youngest among the panelists, Greer Webb. Greer is currently a law student on full scholarship at Emory University School of Law. See, I know you guys, I can just ramble off stuff at the top of my head. There is nothing that Greer has not done in leadership. I'm just saying. Greer is a leader of the First Order, and he is a champion for youth and the underserved. So we're so thankful that he is in law school. I think you're in your second year now.
That's right.
His second year. Welcome back to the show, Greer.
Thanks, Pam. So great to be on the show with all these wonderful people.
Yeah. And here we have, last but not least, Renee Shaw. Renee is super Woman and Wonder Woman all rolled up into one, and you'll find out why. She is a certified doula in the state of New York. She is a staunch Democrat, having served on multiple campaigns and has run for political office herself while living in the state of Texas. She's done all of this while being a mom of a couple of adult children and the mother of 7-year-old triplets. I don't know how. I don't know how she's done it. That's why she's Superwoman and Wonder Woman all into one. Thanks so much for coming back to the show, Renee.
Thank you, Pam, for having me, and I'm so glad to be here with everyone else. You know how we do it, Pam. We just do it. We just do it.
That's what you tell me all the time. You just do it, right? Oh, wow. So we've got a lot of people who are saying hello. All right. Hey, Alicia. Oh, Marshall. Hey, Marshall. Let's see. Loretta. Hello, everyone. John Champion. Hey, John. Just John. Hey, Just John. She is one of our attorney friends here. Okay, guys. Let's first topic up for discussion. Let us speak life about the Biden-Harris legacy. Who wants to go first?
I have something to say.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Narissa.
The thing that I want to say about both of them is that the thing that came to me, and it's going to seem like it has nothing to do with this, but I promise it does, is the movie White Men Can't Jump. I think that most of us should remember that one. It's with Woody Harrelson and Wesley
Snipes.
And they're basketball players who hustle people, on the courts of LA. But Rosie Perez is Woody Harrelson's girlfriend. And she says, sometimes when you win, you lose. And sometimes when you lose, you really win, right? And sometimes it goes into more of a comedic thing. But that quote kind of popped out to me. And I think that history is going to show, and we already can start to see this, that Joe Biden did an excellent job as president, number one, and still doing an excellent job as president. And just, the letting all of the people off of death row, except for the people who committed hate crimes. I thought that was genius. Like, no, Dylan, you gonna stay your little happy self right there on death row. And then it was basically like daring Trump, like, yeah, give a commutation or a pardon to the guy that, destroyed a Black church and families. But I think that history will vindicate Biden. I think it already will. And I think history will also say that Kamala ran, as we all saw, an excellent campaign. But the more I think about it, and I was just talking to someone about this the other day, Kamala's true opponent was not Donald Trump. Kamala's true opponent, or opponents, I should say, were three things that history has proven are very difficult to beat, especially if you have to fight all of them at once: racism, sexism, and media bias. And she could have defeated one of those things. She could have maybe defeated two of those things, but three of those things all together, the road just wasn't there. And if you look at the numbers that have come out, where she lost numbers compared to Biden, it's almost all men.
Yeah.
And that is something that we need to really be concerned about and thinking about going forward, because from what I've been seeing since the election, that's a problem that's going to continue to deepen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If I could jump in here, I think it's important to just run the record, right? I was jotting down some notes as I was reflecting over these past 4 years. The Biden-Harris administration strengthened the economy. They created jobs. That's a fact. They invested, or did their very best to invest, in public education. Another fact. They supported healthcare workers and quality healthcare. Remember, coming on the backs of the COVID-19 pandemic. They made higher education more accessible for folks. They really tried to deal with student loan and debt forgiveness. They
Yes.
backed workers' voices and workers' rights. They stood up for retirees. They really did their best for working families. They did reduce gun violence in their 4 years, and they reinforced democracy and civil rights to the best of their ability while promoting social justice and equality. So let's run that record and talk about what they did, even despite folks acting crazy, folks being racist and ageist and homophobic and everything else. They did their best with the mandate that the American people gave them, that young people gave them, that diverse Americans from all backgrounds gave them. And so I do think that they are worthy of praise. Were they without fault? Absolutely not, but no administration has been.
Right.
And so, as you said at the top of the show, Pam, just in concluding, we can't have a defeatist attitude about all of this. Let's praise their administration and recommit to fighting for justice and civil rights in this next administration, even though we know that's not a priority of theirs.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah,
I think that
go ahead, Zachary.
I think that he'll be seen as a transformational president.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we have to remember is that the American Rescue Plan hasn't fully been implemented. And what's going to happen over the next couple of years is Donald Trump is going to try to take credit for a lot of the good things that's going to happen. Another thing is, one of their biggest flaws was they didn't know how to promote themselves. They just thought doing the work was enough when they should have been, promoting themselves just like Donald Trump promotes everything. They should have been promoting, we've did this, we've done that, and etc. And another thing we shouldn't forget is that he confirmed 39 Black female judges.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
He did.
I think Trump confirmed maybe, I don't even know if he had one or two in his first term. I don't even know if he had that many.
I think he had that.
Well, I think history is going to be kind to Biden. I think, like most elected officials, he did the best he could with the hand he was dealt. As I've said on your show numerous times, I think the Democratic Party set a dangerous precedent by casting him aside in the summer the way they did. But I think history will be kind to Biden. As far as what lies ahead for Harris, I read chatter about her possibly running for governor in 2026. I don't know if that's what she wants. I think the $1 million question is, would she run again? Should she run again? Woo. I'm gonna leave that hot potato alone, but I mean, I have read things along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Clyde, what you think?
Okay.
Oh, no.
They did some good stuff. They did some good stuff, and he's going to be remembered for it because, as Zachary said, down the road, it's about to be a lot of good stuff happening, and your boy will definitely take credit for it. That's what he does. That's who he is, and just hope he can't roll back a bunch of stuff. That's all. That's my only hope, is that he can't get in there and just start taking stuff apart. What he did for the student loans was absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he wanted to go further, but I accept what he did.
Mm-hmm. Renee?
Well, I'll say that I agree with everybody, all the panelists. The only thing I'm going to say is, yes, history is going to prove to everybody that President Biden and Kamala Harris was the best administration in almost the best administration in our history. However, the problem with history is that it takes 10 or 20 years for people to really read the history. And the problem with it now is that even if we could get it in history books, is that too many states are taking out historical facts that are important for young people to know. Young people need to know this in order to go on to be educated voters, to understand why it's important to vote, why it's important to pick your local government all the way up to the top of a ticket, to the national ticket. They don't understand that. Civics is not taught in schools. I'm sorry. Used to be. It's not now.
Yeah.
We need to implement it has to start with education, and education is population. And if we don't do that, it's going to be an uphill battle all the time for the Democrats. Now, the other thing the Democrats have to learn is messaging. They're listening to the DC people. They're not listening to the ground. They need to know how to go to the ground, to listen to people on the ground, to tell them what they want and how they should message it to reach all these different people in our party. We're not a monolithic party like the GOP. Unfortunately, we don't vote to just, make sure the Democrats win. We all want something. Is this one tugging this way? Is this one tugging that way? This one's, what about my rights? What about that right? So it's difficult to message, but we're going to have to learn that. And we're going to have to go lockstep, just like the GOP does, just like the MAGAs do. They vote based on culture, white privilege. Period. Point blank.
They vote like they have something to lose, and we got to start doing the same thing.
There you go. And so they're just like, hey, regardless of whether I'm poor, middle class, or whatever, what I got over the rest of y'all in the Democratic Party, I'm white. I'm male. I get to make some choices. And so that's what we're going against. And until we realize that and get on the ground and talk to people in our party and, independents as well, we're going to have this struggle, and it's going to be work. But I, as Kamala Harris, I love hard work.
Yeah. And the kids in Florida, I don't know what those kids are going to do, because they're already doing it to them. They're already changing the books and changing all the curriculum and everything. So, and how do they expect those kids to do well in other places if they don't know the basics? They don't know the history.
Well, Mr.
If you don't
Allen,
know history, you're bound to repeat it.
Mr. Allen, I would say this. Those are the kids that need to understand that their vote matters. The only way it's going to change is if when they're 18, they get out there and vote to make that change. And I think enough of them are underground who are reading the restricted books list. They're smart. We just have to push them as this generation, other adults, to push them. Read these books, regardless of what your school says. Read them. They know they're doing it. They're going underground and reading these books. So they'll get educated. We just have to support them and get them out there and tell them to go register them to vote. And then we have to do a little more pushing, unfortunately. But that's how it's going to be. It is hard work.
Well, I think one thing we need to do is, I think when you look at this past election cycle, the Democratic Party was focused on trying to convert MAGA voters. And I think that's a mistake. I think we should have put our energy towards those who aren't voting at all, those who sat out this election. Yeah. Because I think those are the people that we need to reach more than anything. I'm the kind of person, and again, I'm just speaking for myself. Just like I can meet you where you are, I can leave you where you are. And the MAGA people have shown themselves time and again who they are. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to waste my time trying to have a civil discussion with you when you've made it clear you're not interested in what I have to say. You're not interested in in acknowledging my humanity. Like, I'm just not going to flog myself like that. So I think we need to focus on those who sat out this election, because I think that's one of the reasons Harris lost. Not to say, I don't want to say she didn't run a good campaign, but she did make some mistakes. That was one of them. Another mistake I think she made was aligning herself with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Yes, I'm glad. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad they had their come to Jesus moment on January 6, 2021. Mm-hmm. But if you look at their voting record, when they were in Congress, most of the time they voted lockstep with Trump. Yeah. So they're not allies. What it is, like, and this goes to messaging, which has already been mentioned. What they don't like about Trump is that he says the quiet parts out loud. That's the only thing that differentiates them from him. So I think Harris made a mistake aligning herself with them, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to convert MAGA people into convince MAGA followers into supporting me," and that did not happen. There's a whole bunch I would like to say, but I do want to hear from the other guests.
Yeah, I would just say, to push back on that a little bit. I don't think she was reaching out to MAGA. I think she was reaching out to the folks in the Republican Party who were like the never Trumpers and the folks who can see the writing on the wall as to what we're about to be going through for the next 4 years. They saw it. And I would say, yes, in terms of their policy goals, you're right. But what they said, and I heard Adam Kinzinger say this several times and Liz Cheney too, we disagree with Kamala on, you know, a lot of policy issues, but our big issue is democracy and protecting this democracy. And we want somebody in there who's going to respect the rule of law. And I don't think that that was necessarily a mistake to try to give an olive branch to those people, because the conventional wisdom in running a campaign is that you win with the middle. And Kamala did win the independent voters. And that's huge. And in any normal election cycle, I think that would have been enough to take it over the top. But where I think you're right, Latrice, and I love the fact that we're always on together. I think we're like a package deal now. Always on, Latrice is on. But where I think that Latrice is right is the people who didn't show up.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple reasons for that.
Yeah.
One is our media environment. The movie I keep thinking, I know y'all like this, y'all don't even watch movies, but Jordan Peele's Nope. And this is one that I thought about a lot because I read this headline from The Atlantic. This is way before Biden stepped down. And it said, you know, Biden's quiet competence might cost him the election. And I was like, since when is being competent a liability? But being competent is only a liability when you are not making a spectacle of yourself. If you haven't seen Jordan Peele's Nope without spoiling it, it starts with that quote from my mom is a pastor. She's gonna kill. I can't remember, but one of the Old Testament books, I think it's Nahum, where it talks about making a spectacle of yourself, and that's what the whole movie is about. And it's about how we, as a culture, value spectacle and style over substance.
Yeah,
and that is something that has become embedded in the American culture in a way that I don't know a lot of people have predicted. And I'm not going to be down on Gen Z and talk, oh, it's TikTok. No, it's people of all ages. And the thing now, and this is also to the news media, that gets the attention is the loudest, noisiest, goofiest, wildest thing gets the attention. Donald Trump is the noisiest, wildest, goofiest, most racist, most sexist, most stupid, and allegedly most stanky person out there. So when you put him on the TV, it boosts their ratings.
Yes.
And it's easy to point the camera at him and say, oh, look at this. Meanwhile, if like Biden, you're quietly competent, back, I would say up until even the 2000s, that would have been enough in the media environment to guarantee you a win, because people would have said, this guy's doing his job. Remember when John McCain lost the election because he's shut down all that grandstanding? People were like, no. But something in our DNA has changed so quickly where now it's like that person. So I lay a lot of the blame for Kamala's loss on the feet of the news media. And I go back to that conversation between Anderson Cooper and Charlemagne the God, when Charlemagne was calling him out and saying, why won't y'all call Trump a fascist? And Anderson's all indignant, like, well, why would I? And Charlemagne's like, why would you not?
Because that's what he is. It's the truth.
Exactly.
The corporate media has been some of the biggest disappointment. And then who owns it? That's the frightening part, because the Washington Post is a premier storied institution as far as journalism. I have friends there, Latrice, right?
But the thing is, you know, for those who are into journalism history like I am, like, and I've had conversations with my buddies on Facebook about this, how knowing what I know, I'm sad but not surprised at what's playing out right now. More than 40 years ago, Ben Badikian wrote a book called The Media Monopoly, which was about the concentration of media ownership. And it's only gotten worse. Yeah. So mind you, if you used to go read the book now, it's 40 plus years old. And the media landscape has only gotten worse. There's like, I was born and raised in New York. We had multiple newspapers. All of that's been decimated now. Newsday, Daily News, those newspapers are shells of their former selves. Same could be said for a lot of papers that are still around, assuming that if they haven't gone under and folded entirely.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to point out, wanted to talk about in my neck of the woods was Judge Merchan's decision on Friday to give Trump an unconditional discharge. I don't agree with that. Like the Democratic Party casting Biden aside in late July, I think the judge's unconditional discharge sets a terrible precedent. I think at the very least, okay, if you're not going to send him to jail, have him pay restitution or some form of restitution. Okay, the mandatory surcharges and court fees are, pocket change, but I think at the very least he should have been ordered to pay some kind of restitution. But I just wanted to put that out there because I think an unconditional discharge, it's pretty much like shrugging your shoulders, like, yeah, he's a convicted felon, it's like, yeah, there's nothing alleged anymore. He's a convicted felon.
What do you think about that, Greer, law student?
I have a lot of thoughts. I'll try and be brief. I'll also just point our attention to the comments for a second. And I think this is true and goes back to one of the points that the panelists made earlier, that not to the same magnitude, but just like all of the accomplishments that Jimmy Carter had before Reagan took office, Trump is going to take credit for these accomplishments that Biden has created. I think that's a good point. I think young people see that. Going back to Ms. Renee's point from earlier down in Florida, we do understand that folks are trying to take away our history, and young people have a long way to go. But as a member of Gen Z, I'll elevate us a little bit and say, I just remember about a year or so ago now, Al Sharpton and Ben Crump were down in Florida, and there were many young activists and organizers saying, hey, we know that our history is being taken away and stolen out from under our noses. We aren't a fan of this. We're going to our school board meetings and speaking up. We're writing and talking on social media about this. Social media is powerful. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think one of the reasons TikTok is getting banned is because it brings so much joy and information to young people and really people of all ages. And I think we're almost trapped in America right now in this situation where I think to Latrice's point earlier, or to someone's point earlier, Trump is just a big spectacle. And we have folks who like that. We have many people in this country who just want to feel like their inner thoughts are broadcast and are acceptable. And I think as a young person, it's scary to see that that's the direction this country is going. I think we have to continue calling it out. And to Pam's point at the top of the show, it's frustrating and difficult to do so. And so we have to give ourselves some grace. We have to rest. And I like to use this analogy in closing that we don't always need to unplug, but sometimes we need to more so recharge. I think a lot of times we unplug completely out of the socket. And then when we try to plug back in, the world's jumped ahead 5 years. We need to recharge. We need to put our phones on do not disturb. We need to go engage in self-care. We need to strategize and organize. Us young people need to talk to older folks. Older folks need to listen and talk to younger folks. Tell us your stories. Give us your wisdom. Young people will listen. Maybe not every single one of us, but most of us. Because everything in this country and everything in the world is on a spectrum, right? And so the more people you can get on your side, the more people you can get to understand how all of this is interrelated and really how every system in this country goes back and stems from slavery. When you have those conversations, especially with people of color, we do get it. We get it. And so I think one of the main, personally, one of the main priorities I have is, to Ms. Renee's point again, turning out young people to vote. We all probably remember 2018, where youth voter turnout was sky high. And that was the year of the Parkland high school shooting down in Florida. And then you had David Hogg and a lot of the Parkland school shooting activists speaking out and talking about policy and talking about voting. Then what happened? I guess you can blame COVID, but I think personally that young people kind of got turned off by the fact that they were listened to just for a little bit of time, but we weren't really taken seriously. And so I think people underestimate how much that ticks people off. And when people see that the system isn't working for them, and we already know it doesn't work as well for marginalized folks, then they sit completely out. So my mission this year is to get people to think, recharge, don't unplug.
I like that.
I want to just say something about the Marshawn's ruling. I think it was on Joy Reid where they were talking about how he sort of read the tea leaves of the Supreme Court and felt that if he had any sanctions against Trump, that they would step in and nullify everything, even, you know, the ruling to convict him at all.
Mhm.
So he sort of that was the only decision he could come to without having it, you know, set aside by the Supreme Court. And another thing I wanted to say is we were talking about Kamala's loss. I think what we saw, for me, would always be about race. And I think what we saw during the election was a master class on the Southern strategy, where everything is about race, but you convolute it to the point where it's not about race, but it's really about race, where it was about groceries and the price of eggs. But now people saying, oh, well, it wasn't really about the price of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a master class on the Southern strategy.
I want to jump in here for a minute too. All y'all have brilliant perceptions of what happened, and I appreciate every comment. I'm going to say the biggest impediment to Kamala winning was the Democratic Party. I know some of y'all are not going to agree with that, but
I don't have an issue with that. You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. They threw Biden under the bus because they wanted somebody else to run. They didn't want Kamala to run. Biden outsmarted them and said, well, if you want me to step down, you're going to have to take Kamala. Period, point blank. Mm-hmm. And they had no choice. Mm-hmm. But did they back her? Really, did they back her? How many did you see Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, all of them out there really going to town to get people to turn out for her? Not really. They said a few things. I was mad with Schumer because he attended that Catholic charity thing where Trump went and just scorched the earth about Kamala and pretty much called her out of a name and Biden. And he's sitting up there shucking and jiving. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing? So it was the Democratic Party that threw Kamala and Biden under the bus. They thought they could replace her. Mm-hmm. I think Biden, and I'm going to tell you how I think so savvy he is. Mm-hmm. I think Biden was just hoping to get reelected so that he could step down in the middle of the second term and hand it to Kamala, and it would have been easier for her to run to be reelected as president. That was I think that's just my view.
Mm-hmm. And you're not wrong, because like one of the things that irked me was when I would hear people say, "Oh, he's a one-term president," and it's like he never said he would only serve one term. He never said that.
No.
Now, whether or not he should have ran for 2 terms is another story, but he never said he was going to be a one-term president. Correct. And the thing is, when I heard people making an issue of his age, it's like, well, hold up. He was quote-unquote old in 2020. Exactly. So to make an issue of his age now just struck me as disingenuous.
Yep.
It really did.
Yeah, but he didn't self-destruct in the debate in 2020.
Well, that
was the biggest downfall.
But if I can, though, I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping in, but there was somebody, I can't remember if it was Jon Stewart or if it was Rachel Maddow, but they listed the number of negative stories about Biden and the debate versus stories about Trump and his conviction, which leads me back to saying this media environment is toxic. And if we're going to have any hope of taking back the Senate in 2028 or taking back the House in 2026 or taking back the House in 2026, assuming God willing that we will have elections and that the whole country won't
have elections.
Yeah.
Okay.
But seriously, what we have to do is look at the media. And I want to quickly go back to what Greer was saying, just 2 quick points that I feel like, especially when we talk about young folks, and I feel strongly about this because I have a lot of young folks in my life. I have a daughter that's a little bit, also a Gen Zer, we talk about these things. And this also goes to why people didn't show up. And I tell people say, well, the Russians interfered in 2016. Like, you only read the headline. This is what the interference was. They weren't messing with your ballots. They were sending out chat bots, and they were doing all of these things. And they were like talking about Hillary, says predators and all this stuff. You can read it in the Miami Herald. I did not make this up. There are farms of chatbots in Russia and other places. And did you notice that there's social media around the election? You would see similar comments, negative comments about Kamala on almost any YouTube, Facebook story about her that was public facing. So young folks who mainly get their news from those sources, and because of the changes that Mr. Allen and other folks talked about the school system don't have, and Latrice, critical thinking skills, they think, well, maybe a lot of people think this, I don't know, and they take these comments to heart, not realizing even if they were American, their opinion is just somebody's opinion, but it's some Russian bot somewhere, doing this. So we have to increase we have to increase folks' awareness of the environment and where they're getting their news from. But that also goes
media
to
literacy is all about.
We
That's
have
what
to
media
make
literacy
sure.
is all about.
Yeah,
Exactly. But I'm not even talking about media literacy. We need media literacy, but we also need civic literacy and civic awareness. If I hear one more person, going back to what I believe Zach mentioned about it, if I hear one more person say that the president is responsible for the price of eggs, gas, or anything else, it's like I feel like that lady in that commercial, like that's not how any of this works. Because it's not how any of this works.
Correct.
Now,
We all know that though.
yeah.
Don't
Too many people don't, but you're right. You're right.
If you have millions of birds die, the
Yeah.
price of eggs are going to go up. It's
Exactly.
Which
And then going back to the final thing I want to say about what Greer was saying, I think a lot of young folks too, especially if you're voting for the first time and you're getting involved, and this is where history comes in too, right? If you don't understand that, especially for folks of color, women, LGBT folks, with any marginalized group, bad things happen fast. Bad things happen at lightning speed. Good things take forever. And I like to tell people from 1955, the time when Rosa Parks, December 1st, refused to sit down on that bus, and it took them a year to desegregate the buses. It took them another 8 years to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It took over a decade. That is something that we have to think about, and that's where knowing history helps us understand. Like Pam, you invoke the ancestors. If you understood everything that our ancestors went through and fought for, there is no way you would not be out there every single day trying to make sure that you did something to make sure that we don't make all their sacrifices in vain.
And we cannot. And let's get on to another topic, because we'll be here till Jesus come back. Okay.
Hey, Pam, he's coming back soon. The way we messing things up in this country.
I know, and listen, I have pictures and everything, but listen, let's talk a little bit about President Jimmy Carter. His passing, I believe, had most Americans, I think, in their feelings a bit, because the juxtaposition between a Jimmy Carter and what's about to come into office, it's so night and day. You're kind of wondering, is this the same country? What is this? I mean, because Jimmy Carter was all that is good and noble, and
they treated him so bad.
Why is that?
So bad.
And all of that.
They treated him so bad.
Yeah, and then
I was a kid when he was president, but I do remember, he got a very, rough shellacking, and he was treated badly, but he redeemed, he was vindicated outside in his post-presidency. He is like with the solar, installing the solar panels on the White House roof.
Why was he so good and noble?
What did
you know
say?
why he was so good and noble?
Why?
Because he didn't grow up in Plains, Georgia. He grew up in a little town outside of Plains, Georgia, that was predominantly black, and he was raised by black people.
Yeah.
He was in a documentary, and he talked about how he slept on a pallet in a black family's home and all this stuff, and that's where he learned manners and morals and all these things.
Yeah.
His town was only 24% white.
Right.
Everybody else was black.
He said all his friends were black growing up.
Interesting. And why is it that we're just learning about that now? Because I don't ever remember hearing that backstory when he was president and stuff. I don't remember that.
That is true.
Right.
Yeah.
Along
I mean,
with
I'm in
asking
the same
for
boat as you,
the
Pam.
black
Like,
guy
I
to
knew he
sleep
grew
with
up in
him
a small town,
in the
but I
Navy.
wasn't aware of everything the gentleman just said. The stuff the gentleman just said is news to me. But hey, you learn
Yeah,
something new every
it's
day.
kind of hard to believe, but I saw the documentary where
I did too.
President Carter was saying it, that how he was raised, how he slept on a pallet in their home, and when it got cold, he named a woman by name. He said she would let me move my pallet closer to the fireplace and all these things.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, a lot of things happen in history that we don't know because, you know, I wasn't aware of all the massacres that happened in America. You know, you hear about Rosewind and Tulsa, but there's so
Rosewood,
many
yeah.
other massacres. Why didn't we hear about it? Because it's something America didn't want us to know, just like they didn't want to know us to know about his growing up,
Right.
because it would have turned off a lot of those people in Georgia who actually voted for him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just to jump in here, Pam, I know we cut you off a little bit, but not only is Mr. Zachary correct that President Carter mentioned that himself in some documentaries and autobiographies, I believe, but Ambassador Andrew Young mentioned it during his state funeral the other day. And I'm down here in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was mind-blowing to me that he grew up in a majority Black town. I believe Andrew Young told the story about how he talked to Jimmy Carter about his upbringing, about who he knew. And Jimmy Carter actually was friends with the racist sheriff down there. And Andrew Young was taken aback. But then in the next sentence, Jimmy Carter said, but I'm also friends with a bunch of these, named a bunch of Black folks down there that Andrew Young knew or knew of. And this gave President Carter some credibility. I mean, he didn't come from much, and he came from a majority Black town. And so he understood to an extent, obviously he wasn't Black, that struggle, and that people he knew struggled in ways that were different from his struggle. And so I think that made him actually more effective than anyone gives him credit for. And of course, we know now that Ronald Reagan came in and took a bunch of the credit. But again, to Mr. Zachary's point, it's frustrating that in this country, uniquely, we have to wait until people die or until massacres happen to learn the truth. So big ups to President Jimmy Carter. I have much respect for him, and the folks of Atlanta and Georgia really seem to like him, especially now that we're learning so much more about his background and the way that he really did his best in that time to look out for Black folks.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I think President is passing, but I'm glad he made his transition while Biden was still in office. Because I would hate to think, let's say Carter passed away at the end of this month, when you know who is in the White House. I think the way Carter would have been sent off would have been very different. It would have been tainted. And I want to just quickly speak to Lee Young's comment that was just posted. I agree with your comment about economic literacy. I think that's important as well. Biden and Harris, they tried to address student loan debt. My only issue with their approach is that it doesn't get to the root of the problem. The reason so many people are in, student loan debt is not the principal, it's the interest rates. Mm-hmm. That's why they're in the predicament that they're in. But that's a whole nother conversation. So let's get back.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, let's get back.
I got a question.
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all think, you guys think Michelle didn't come because she didn't want to sit next to Trump?
Oh, 100%.
I heard that too.
100%. Yeah, no, she told Barry that you on your own, homie.
No, you on your own, baby. I'm not sitting next to that fool for 3 hours. For 3 hours.
I want to jump back into President Carter for a minute. And what I want to say about President Carter, he's always been one of my favorite presidents. There's a handful that I have. Lyndon B. Johnson is one of them. Mm-hmm. Carter, of course, Obama. Biden is going to be at the top of the list. Abe Lincoln, because he did the Emancipation Proclamation thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just a handful of presidents that stand out to actually fight for social justice in some way, in some form. Carter, the sad part of President Carter's presidency is that people will, once again, I told you, history catches up with you 10, 20 decades later, or 10 or 20 years later, decades later. So everybody is finding out this about Carter because nobody had any interest in knowing about him. And so unless, unfortunately, if you pass away, then you get to look at history and see what they did. But also, Carter got a really bad rap about the release of the hostages in Iran.
Yeah,
he actually was the one that negotiated that.
Yeah, he did.
And they got released a few days after the election. Once again, it comes to Democrats and their messaging. Again, the Democrats let Trump, President Biden did a flawless job as being a president. Of course, he made some errors, but pretty much is an impeccable 4 years. What they didn't do was let President Biden be president. They let Trump run as a shadow president in the media. He was always up there talking. Who do you know can go visit with presidents and leaders of other countries while there is a president in office as if you're president? That's what they allowed you to do, and that's what the media does. The Democrats have got to get better at playing their game because it's a new game now. It's a new era. They've got to be out there talking now about 2026. And that's why I formed a private Facebook group called the Underground Blue People, so that we can start planning now, today, not tomorrow, before he gets in office, on which candidates we can flip in Congress, who we want to target and push out there and support and all of that. You have to start now. That's what the GOP best believe. They already got their people lined up.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But I have to, I'm sorry, Ms. Pam, I didn't mean to cut you off.
They're behind the 8 ball. We need to be more proactive. We can't let them run the narrative and be out there constantly talking and telling lies. We got to be out there like, hey, guess what this, everybody's afraid that Trump administration is going to take credit for all the things that Biden has done, like the CHIP Act and infrastructure and all of that. He's going to try. We can only do it if we let them.
If we
all these governors and mayors need to be out there talking about how it was the Biden administration that got your roads fixed. How it's the Biden administration that got you a 6-figure job working in a chips plant, because that's what they're starting people at, training them with no high school diploma.
Right. And we got to do that. And that's to this point of why I even started this platform, is to educate people, because for one thing, many people are not newsaholics or just journalist buffs or just geeks or in the media like I am. And I read and watch everything. So it's some kind of way. I think there's a power in a democracy of your peers giving information and rehearing it. And so I ask everybody to share the videos. It's free, it's easy, so we can keep doing that. We have to do something. This is what do something. And so if it ain't nothing but you all clicking the switch and subscribing to the channel and sharing the videos and information, that's what we have to do. We have to help ourselves do something, to do better than what we've been doing, period.
That's right.
And to your question at the beginning of the show, you asked, what are our forms of resistance? And I personally have 2 answers for that. One, my existence. The fact that, like, I celebrated my birthday last week, and as I wrote on my Facebook page, the fact that I'm still here after everything I've been through and what lies ahead, my existence is a form of resistance. And also, I was traveling. I don't know if I was going to work or coming from work, but I saw a woman with a handbag, and it said, "My joy is my resistance." My joy is a form of resistance. And I think when you saw the media stories, especially the bias stories attacking Harris about her laugh or what have you, hey, that's a form of joy. It's like you can't turn my frown, like you can't, mess with my smile. You can't take away my joy. Joy is a form of resistance. And I think, not to say that we got to be happy-go-lucky, like smiling and dancing, but like you said, we can't be defeatist. We got to put one foot in front of the other and keep going like Harriet Tubman did. And she said that. She kept going because she knew in her heart she couldn't stay where she was at. So we have to do the same. Okay. And in terms of messaging, I just want to say this real quick. Another mistake I think a lot of people made was they assumed that getting Harris into the White House would be the finish line. And it's like, no, that would have only been the starting point, because the question I raised with you several times, rhetorically, of course, was assuming that the Republicans kept the majority in the House and they regained the majority in the Senate, what was her plan for governing? I threw that out there numerous times. And this goes to what Renee is saying about, strategizing now for, making inroads in the House next year and, as well as in the Senate. The thing is, these elected officials do have to answer to their voters.
Right.
If they're not bringing home the bacon, their job is not permanent. So I think what we're seeing right now, and I saw a comment from Nikki Mayo that I just want to touch on real quick. Who's benefiting from the willful ignorance that has permeated society? Because that's what a lot of this is. It's willful ignorance. You can no longer say, especially with the rise of social media, you cannot get away with saying, I didn't know, no one told me. No, the information is out there. It's always been out there. If you really want to know, you have no shortage of sources. It doesn't have to just be the legacy outlets like Washington Post and New York Times. You have magazines, you have websites. The information is out there. So let me stop rambling.
Well, yes and no, Latrice, because the thing about it is you got to take it all together. Yes, there's not just legacy media anymore. And I think that's good because technology, in order to do what we're doing right now, we would have had to all come down to somewhere in Durham and be in a station and do public access. And y'all remember public access TV shows?
Yes.
So technology
for those who are really old school. Yes, I remember those shows.
But yet, at the same time, getting the information out there is still two things. I know I've been beating this drum, but you just mentioned about the people attacking Kamala for her laugh. That wasn't just Fox News and OAN and all those right-wing folks. That was coming from the NYT and WAPO and all of those folks too. And that is a problem that we have to consider is, so the folks who are supposed to be neutral, allegedly, or even on your side, like the folks on MSNBC, they were one of the first folks to talk about, oh, Biden, he did this and he did that and blah, 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 blah. Oh, he's terrible. He's got to go. It was the left media that came out with that first. But then even if you get past that, even if the information is there, the information media is so saturated that for folks who don't know, it would be like me, I guess, trying to go shopping for something that I don't know anything about, right? I'm trying to think about something that I've never, like a diamond or something like that. I don't know a lot about jewelry. Jewelry is not my thing. So I would have to do a lot of research before I bought a diamond, or I would have to have someone with me there to walk me through and say, here's what you look for in a diamond, blah, 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 blah. What we're missing right now is because, as Mr. Allen so wisely noted, the schools aren't teaching critical thinking and the media landscape is so garbage. What we're missing is that link there that walks people through and says, this is a trustworthy source. This is a not trustworthy source. This is why you can't do. And again, this is not just on young people. I talked to a senior elder the other day who was telling me some stuff, and I was like, that's not true. Right? It's like, okay, yeah. And people can do so much with deep fakes and AI now that it's easy for people to get distracted and think, well, that's true because I heard or so-and-so told me. And a lot of the most powerful things happen we hear it from our friends, or our friends share stuff with us. So going back to, again, what Latrice said, those folks who aren't voting, the thing I think the Democrats did miss out on is the Democrats for the past 20, 30 years, we're talking about middle class. Not since Bobby Kennedy have they been talking about the poor. Because I guarantee that a lot of the folks who didn't show up in that last election is folks who feel like, well, yeah, they legitimately feel, because I always read people for filth when they say this, and Miss Pam has heard me say this before, when they say there's no difference between the Democrats and Republicans. But if you are a Black person who's been living in poverty for more than one generation,
there's a hell of a difference.
Literally is true, because you've been living in the project since Bush was president. So you're like, yeah, ain't nothing going to change. My benefits might go up or down a little bit, but my life is going to be roughly the same. So I think, but that goes not so much to messaging as it goes to policy and policy focus. But poverty means Blackness. So that's another issue.
All right, we're going to switch subjects again, and we're going to talk about what is happening to our neighbors out west in California. The wildfires in California are just
unbelievable.
I'm glad you mentioned the wildfires because I saw a story in the Washington Post, I believe. They were trying to go.
Latrice, let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
Please. Okay, so what I was going to say is that with these wildfires in California, the Republican narrative, okay, the Republican narrative has begun in full force. In full force, it's begun, and the finger pointing. There's been these massive attacks against Karen Bass, the mayor of LA. Well, what and the water is out, and this has happened, or whatever. Guys, if you've got fire infernos, tornadoes, and all of this kind of stuff, you ain't gonna get a whole lot of pressure on nothing. Things are gonna be messed up. So what do we think that we have to do? And I wanted to show some share a screen on this. Here it is. Okay, do you guys see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I don't know if
is that a fire tornado?
It is a fire.
What exactly?
That is a fire tornado.
Wow.
Like the hurricane force winds that they're having there. It's just like we're used to having the hurricane force winds in North Carolina, but it's water and sand and all of that. I can't imagine fire coming at us at that kind of rate with those types of winds. There's this place called Altadena where a dear friend of mine, and he's a PR man out of Altadena, California. I did not know. We learned the history on social media, and now the traditional media is talking about it, how it is a Black enclave of the middle class there in California, and it was one of the first where they didn't have to deal with redlining and stuff like that. So there was generational wealth being built there because people were able to move and build their homes, and several of those homes have been, many of them have been destroyed. My friend, ironically, his house is still standing, praise God.
Wow.
A building on his property has been burnt to the ground, and a tree within feet of his house was burnt to the ground. But his house and the house on the left and the right of him are all the standing on their block.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's just amazing. God's grace. Amazing. So the question I was going to build up with all of this is, how do we redirect that messaging or the talking about these wildfires? Because you already know the last time they had bad wildfires, when Trump was in office, he delayed California getting their money. Okay. So now what? Clyde? What do you think?
Same thing, same game. 8 days is going down. 8 days is going down, and all that stuff he used to do, he gonna do it. And I hate to be the Debbie Downer of the group, but
You're not
alone.
I mean, but it's coming at us 100 miles an hour, and as I look around me, I don't see nobody react. I don't see nobody preparing for the next eight days.
And I think a lot of it, Brother Allen, is because people have accepted this defeatist attitude, right? Because this time Trump has all three branches. I personally, I've heard some folks who say, well, what really can I do? So I'm just going to sit back and protect me and mine. I think that could be part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's part. I think that's true. I was just going to say, I didn't mean to speak on top of you, Pam, but I'm so glad that you kind of read my mind, because I was going to mention, I saw a story, I think it was in the Washington Post, where Mayor Bass was being criticized, but then it was pointed out that when she negotiated contracts with the LA Fire Department, they got raises, they got an increase in funding. So it's like, hey, don't be so quick to throw her under the bus. And I was also reading there were earthquakes in San Francisco. This is some it's just I saw the tornado, the fire tornado, and then the earthquakes, and it's just it's insane what's going on in that state right now. But I just offer my empathy I did make a donation. I made a donation on Friday. It's not a lot, but it's something. And I think that's one thing I've always done is I'm a monthly donor to numerous organizations. I'm going to continue donating monthly. I'll continue serving on my community board. That's how I feel I can best make a difference in addition to existing, not being defeatist. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by that, but then again, you wake up. That just getting to wake up in the morning is a gift, and so you use that.
Right. Yeah. I think that's powerful. And just for folks listening in, Pam, if I could, I'm going to read the quote that you have on the screen.
Yes, thank
for those
you.
Who may not be able to see. It says, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated." And that's a quotation attributed to Maya Angelou, and the pictures of Maya Angelou and Coretta Scott King, I believe, sitting at a table together. And I just wanted to add quickly on to Latrice's point and say that, yes, I was just so moved by what Latrice just said. All of that on top of existing, right? On top of maintaining your joy, on top of maintaining connections to your family and your friends and your community. You have to, again, plug in, and you have to engage in self-care to be able to take it to the next level and do some of this deep, difficult strategizing. And so my heart does break. I'm just seeing everything going on out in California, specifically the fires. Pam, to your question directly, my response is, for all of his flaws, I thought Gavin Newsom did a good job and has done a good job of messaging for a long time. Even when he had that little debate with Ron DeSantis on Fox News, I mean, he ate him for lunch. And the way that he messages is just so direct and simple. I mean, they were asking him, oh, Republicans and Trump are blaming you and Karen Bass and the California Democrats for these fires. What do you have to say? And he said, A, it's not true. And B, Trump hasn't been out here yet. And President Biden made the time to stop by fire stations and speak to us, even as he was out here for his great-granddaughter's birth. Mm-hmm. And so redirect the conversation to the truth and to something that people can connect with. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the Democrats really mess up. And I have this phrase that I say often, and it's just, we have to make politics personal. Mm-hmm. The root word of politics, POL, comes from the ancient Greek, which means of a people or of a citizenry. So when people are like, I'm not political, you don't do people? Are you a hermit? Like, what do you mean? We have to get back to messaging and allowing people to see themselves in these conversations. So saying, hey, that's not true. And actually, here's what's happening. And he was out here for a life event, the birth of a great-granddaughter, and still made time to figure out what the truth is. And we're going to do better in the future. Okay, nobody has been eating Gavin Newsom up for that response. But instead, some of these Democrats are playing oopsie daisy and, oh, they could have done better beforehand. This is not the time to say that they should have done better beforehand, A. And B, if they should have done better beforehand, that means it was before Karen Bass got there, because she just got there. So nobody is using their common sense. And I just will close with that.
Yeah. If I could,
when I hear people say, oh, I'm not political, you just have to remind them, you may not be political, but your landlord is. You may not be political, but your employer is. You may not be political, but your chances are your neighbor is, or, you know, your friend. Like, I always say, point that out. Their employer and their landlord is definitely political.
I always say, my favorite saying to people who say, I'm not into politics, but you may not be into politics. Politics is into you.
I say that same thing. If I could just say two things really quickly, the two words that haven't come up yet in this whole discussion about the wildfires is climate change.
Yeah.
And all of this is happening, and the horrible hurricane season that we had here in North Carolina, all of this is happening because we have not dealt with climate change. But that also has to do with the money and politics. And that's why a lot of things aren't happening that need to be happening, because of the gas and oil lobby. But I just wanted to throw out the words climate change, just to make sure that I know we're all on the same page, but just wanted to make sure I said it. But the second thing, to go to what Mr. Allen was saying about you haven't heard people saying things, I can only speak, for the spaces that I'm in, but I can say that myself and other Black women in particular, because I'm in a lot of spaces where Black women talk about politics and other things. And there has pretty much been both the spoken and unspoken agreement that we're not broadcasting anything until it's time for action. We are watching and we are waiting. It's not defeatist. I feel a lot of things, but weirdly after the election, I did not feel like defeated. I think part of it too also is we know that it's about to get bad, but we don't know exactly what's about to happen. So we don't want to expend a lot of energy on the worrying about what could happen. But trust and believe, once it starts to go down, we'll be ready. And there are people who are waiting in the wings, ready to do things, but just even though I don't like him at all, as Lil Wayne said, real G's move in silence like lasagna. So that's what we're doing. So just because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to agree with Clyde that in 8 days, I think America's about to enter the twilight zone. And I think by the time Donald Trump says I do, they're going to have the mass deportation buses already filled. Trust me.
It's going to come 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And while they got you looking at something that you think is bad, they're going to be really doing something bad around the corner.
I want to throw this out, though. It's going to take time for all of these things to happen. That's the other thing. Trump is going to say, please, if no one hears anything else I say, and I'm sorry, I know I cut you off a little bit, Mr. Allen, I apologize, but
no worries.
He can say a lot of stuff, but there's very little he can do.
Right.
The president under the Constitution has very limited power. If we had more time in the show, I would give y'all my DC superhero.
Part of the January 6th rioters.
But here's the thing. He can do that because that's one of his powers. But there's only a handful of them. But there are a lot of things. He's going to try to deport folks. One thing I can tell you, the ACLU already got that lawsuit ready to go, ready to be filed right now. They've been working on it. The NAACP, LDF, they got lawsuits that's already ready to go just based on what he said he's going to do. Mm-hmm. So I can say, Mr. Zachary, the one thing I can say for sure is that those buses won't be filled on day one because there's certain things that a president just can't do. Now, can I say that by January 21st, 2026, that would be the case? No, but I can say that it's going to take a lot more time than just a day or 24 hours.
Well, can you say that about Florida?
I'm sorry, what about Florida?
Can you say that? Can you say that about Florida? Because the Sanchez to put them people on the bus and send their butts right across the bridge.
Well, that's different though, because those people were already under his jurisdiction. All he did was move them to another state because they were already under the. They weren't under ICE jurisdiction, if I remember correctly, but they were under the jurisdiction of the Florida police. That's completely different than what Trump is talking about. DeSantis sent them from Florida to Massachusetts or wherever, trying to make a point about how liberals don't care because it's not in their backyard, whatever.
You don't think that the Sanchez is going to take the chance to say Trump said do this, so we can ready to do this now?
There's still courts and there's still something called due process.
Well,
so if someone came to your house today and arrested you, they don't put you in, they can put you in jail, right? Depending on what they accuse you of. But you have, within 48 hours, you have the right to have a hearing and an arraignment, to know what the charges are, to have a bail hearing. All of this stuff is due process. It has to happen. If they're talking about folks being deported, there's a process that has to happen for every individual person. And even for, like after 9/11, when they were talking about folks who were terrorists, even they had due process.
Yeah.
Some of them were still sitting in Gitmo for years, waiting for their court dates.
Yeah, I remember that.
All of this takes time to play out. So the one ray of hope, the last time I was on here, I said I didn't know a lot that was going to happen. But the one thing I can say that should give people hope is that he's going to try to do a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I know we can do is to tie it up in court for a long time, to at least delay. We might not be able to, but we can at least delay.
Hey, Pam, I want to chime in and circle back to the LA fires.
Yeah.
My biggest concern about the LA fires, because I think many of the people are going to get compensated, because I've been hearing a news conference with the mayors of different cities and stuff, and they say they already have checks ready for people. I think and of course, they're not going to be able to rebuild right away. They may not be able to rebuild it all, but they'll get taken care of. My issue is the health issues that are going to come out of these fires.
Oh, yeah.
The ashes are so bad. And I have not heard of any governmental official providing hazard masks for people until they can get out to a safer place.
I haven't either. And I've only seen one of my friends on air. He used to be in this market. His name is Tim. He had on a mask, and he had on the eye mask and a nose mask. It was clear. And he was reporting the news out in LA. And I told him, I said, Tim, you got to keep that mask on 24/7. And so many of the reporters are just going out there and stuff. And I mean, all of that plastic. I mean, it's awful. It's just awful.
You need a respirator mask.
Yeah.
Correct.
That little one, that ain't gonna do nothing. You need a respirator.
Yeah, the COVID mask are not gonna work.
No.
I know. I was watching CNN the other day. I don't watch it much anymore, but I was watching CNN, and Anderson Cooper took his stuff off, and I was just yelling, like, dude, turn around. Do you see what's right behind you? Why are you trying to be an OG right now? Like, this stuff is serious. But I agree. I wanted to circle back to what Attorney Smith was saying, but I think Mr. Zachary was trying to get in there about some of his concerns with what Trump is going to do on all these issues right after he gets sworn in.
I just wanted to say what the good attorney said was true in normal times, but when we enter the twilight zone, we're going to have a man that's already been confirmed above the law. And even though there's due process and stuff, when they fill those buses up, they're going to run them straight across the border before anybody could say anything. And I guarantee you, the man already has said, that Holman guy or whatever his name is, has already said they're going to hit the ground running, and it's going to happen on the first day as a show to the base.
Exactly. And that's my concern, and I think that's a good point, just in dovetailing with what Attorney Smith said. It will take time, but again, going back to what I said earlier, President Obama called it the okie doke, I think. And I think folks need to not get bamboozled this time, because the Republicans have all three branches of government. It's another conversation to talk about the Supreme Court and how corrupt they've gotten and how above the law they've gotten. Somebody was saying earlier, it may have been Attorney Smith, and I'm in law school, so I understood the point, that Judge Merchan is limited in what he's able to do, and that I think it may have been Mr. Zachary, that he only had certain reins within he could move and operate. But look at what the Supreme Court is doing. I think a lot of folks in this country are leading from the back, right? Or leading from behind. And you see folks, this goes to messaging on the right, being super innovative with what they're doing. But yet Democrats always say, oh, we're constrained by this or that. And I'm, again, in law school, so I understand the rule of law, but we've got to get creative. There's no law against being creative in seeking justice. What do we think the civil rights folks were doing? Were they not being creative in seeking justice? And so I think there's a difference, just for the lay folk out there, between doing something illegal and getting creative. And so I'm worried about, on the one hand, the Republicans having all three branches of government. And I'm also worried, and this may have been another topic, Pam, so excuse me if I'm jumping the gun, but with these people that Trump is trying to get confirmed for his cabinet, I'm worried about the people he's surrounding himself with, and I think they're even crazier than before. So I'll be quiet.
Cash Patel,
man.
When it comes to his cabinet, remember, they don't have to be competent; they just have to be loyal.
Yeah,
exactly.
And there's not going to be a General Milley in there this time who's going to say, "Oh no, you're not," and because he learned that, he doesn't appreciate. There are some people, like the people that I roll with, my friends, is always like, we don't do the whole yes man, yes woman thing. Some people don't value that, though. They only want people around them who will be that yes man, that yes woman. Trump is one of those people. Right. And he learned that the first time, and he's not going to make that mistake again. And we see that with who he has appointed. But I will say this. I don't mean to say that we won't see abuses. Please don't get me wrong. I just don't want people to think that he's like this all-powerful guy who can snap his fingers and make certain things happen. He can snap his fingers and release those J6 guys. Unfortunately, that he can do. There's a couple other things he can snap his fingers and do. But I really want us to focus on the fact that he doesn't have all the power. Unfortunately, Congress has all the power. And right now, they're mostly run by the Republican Party. But let's look at the good side. Now, I am by nature an optimist, so I'm finally getting my optimism back. So let's look at it. Mike Johnson's majority in the House, and they control the budget and everything, is razor thin. Razor thin.
Right.
And that's one thing. Second thing, for all we've been talking about messaging, See, this is the other thing. We somehow have this idea that the Democrats are horrible with messaging. They're really not. Again, it's the media landscape. If you listen to Fox News all day and you listen in the truck and listen to conservative talk radio all day, you're getting all their talking points. The problem with the people who vote Democratic tend to pop in, pop out. They're not plugged into that, live factory 24/7. So they're getting that. But we also have to remember that there are still governors, right? There's still federalism until the Supreme Court gets rid of that. So there's the governors and the mayors are going to be very important over these next 4 years. And I've been telling people, I'll say it publicly, if you are a Black person or a woman who cares about your reproductive rights, you might want to think, and I did say this on the last time, you might want to think about moving to a state that has a Democratic governor if you're really concerned about things, because that will give you an extra layer of protection. There's no guarantees in this, but it's just an extra layer. And the last thing that I wanted to say, again, we talk about messaging, but everything that we're seeing with the Republican takeover of the Supreme Court, all of this stuff, this didn't happen overnight. They worked to get rid of Roe for almost 50 years. Every single time that there was an election, when they lost, they weren't like, oh, Clinton won, I'm never going to vote Republican again. Oh, Obama won, I'm never. They were like, we're going to be slow and steady. Slow and steady wins the race. We're going to keep our eye on the prize and remember what we're going for. And because they had that goal, they weren't deterred from it. If I were to say the one thing the Democrats need something more akin to what the Black Panthers had in the 60s, like a 10-point program. Say, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to stop until we get these things. Something that any kindergartner could recite. If there's any messaging issue, it's that, so that whenever people get discouraged, they don't just give up and say, I'm not voting next time because I didn't get what I wanted.
Okay.
Maybe they can. Maybe instead of Project 2025, they can call it Project Staying Alive, because it's going to get tougher.
Right. That's exactly right.
But when you have a guy that's
good night, everyone.
Night. But you got a guy that's punking the world. You got a guy that the world is treating as president. He just punked the prime minister into quitting.
No, that was probably already going to happen, though. That didn't have anything. I don't think that had anything to do with Trump. Trudeau's been in trouble for a minute.
Yeah, he has been, but I hate the optics.
He didn't want to deal with the tariffs of it. He don't want to deal with Trump dogging him out all the time. Trump got that man out of office.
No, I think
he's already in trouble in this country. Mm-hmm. If Trump drops the tariffs on him, then he's really in trouble. He's not staying around dealing with that. He probably could have handled, okay, yeah, my guy did just quit, and yeah, everybody's kind of pissed, but I can make a couple of moves and get them back in order. But if Trump make him his enemy, who wants to deal with that?
I do think, and this is interesting, Pam, guide us if we're getting off track, but I think how world leaders respond to Trump's presidency is going to be interesting. I think the president of Mexico, I believe it's their first woman president. She's a boss. She's a badass. And this whole Gulf of America crap that Trump wants to turn the Gulf of Mexico into, she cut that down and made a little joke about it. And so I wonder how world leaders are going to stand up to Trump this time. I don't know whether or not he got Trudeau out of there. I'm sure that didn't help Trudeau want to stick around. But I think it's important to note that America is a country that operates in the globe. And so how our relationships are going to change with our allies and adversaries, if at all, is something that I'm looking out for as Trump gets sworn into office here in 8 days.
Hey, Sam, I want to say something quick about when we were talking about something great about Biden and Kamala Harris. Biden has been the best international president ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. NATO is the strongest it's ever been. And a few months ago, he had this meeting with all the NATO leaders, and he's got some stuff in the background that we don't know about. Biden has tried to fortify this country, fortify NATO as best he could before he leaves to retire. Mm-hmm. I believe they got a plan in place to hang tight, and they're going to all stay strong, regardless of what Trumpster does, to make sure that they keep the alliance together until we can flip the Congress in 2026. I also believe that and that Ukraine is going to hang on a little bit longer because Biden smartly got the billions of dollars to approve to protect them before he goes. So he's like, here's billions of dollars. Even some Republicans are going to give you some more money, and you hang in there for 2 more years. You did before when he was in office. So just hang in there, people. Biden is a boss. He really is a boss.
He is. I got to show y'all this because this is something funny that I think is on our side. And that's why I think that things aren't, you know what? I always believe God got a ram in the bush. And this is an interesting ram in the bush here. Here it is. This is the lucky sauce right here. The fight between the maggots. Steve said, I will do anything to keep Elon Musk out of the White House. I will have Elon Musk run out of here by Inauguration Day, Bannon told the Italian Daily, and it's in Italian, so I won't try to read it this week. He will not have a blue pass to the White House. He will not have full access to the White House. He will be like any other person. Now, how he plans on doing that, I don't know, but they are not happy with Elon.
And they're not happy with
I got so much popcorn. I'm buying stock in popcorn. I'm waiting for this show. The MAGAs versus the Elonics.
Also, remember I talked about that razor thin congressional margin?
Yes.
The other thing is, again, we talk about their messaging. They fight all the time. When George W. was president, he had the majority. They spent so much time fighting. They didn't get their Social Security stuff done. Same thing happened during Trump's first term. So when he had a Republican majority, they're going to spend so much time fighting amongst themselves that if Hakeem and the soldiers and AOC, if they can hold it together for 2 years with our support, I would be surprised if they're going to get some things passed that are going to give us pause, but they're going to have a hard time getting some other big things done. If
Social Security and all that kind of stuff, and Medicaid and all that, Affordable Health Care Act. I really believe that they're going to be fighting because they are really, I'm telling you, they are really mad at each other.
It's quite interesting. They're mad at Vivek Ramaswamy too, because he said that white people can't do these jobs, and that's why we bring Indian folks and folks from other countries in here. Now the white folks said, "You're done." I haven't seen a tweet from that dude in like months.
No,
I mean,
he said y'all don't raise your kids right.
Do you remember? Hey guys, do y'all remember the Tea Party?
Yeah.
What happened to them? That's because they be fighting, and Steve Bannon and all those people, they're gone because they destroyed each other. That's what's going to happen to the Elonics and the MAGAs. They're going to annihilate one another.
And, we just have to remember that, again, going back to history, patience, if you study history, patience really is a virtue, but you have to have a plan and a goal to work toward. And if we can remember, as Black folks, we should always know what our goal is. So if we can just remember to be patient and hold on to each other and lift each other up during these times, that's going to be so important, is just to keep an eye on each other and, keep in contact with each other and do support, because we're going to need a lot of that. And there's going to be some really dark times, and some folks are going to be deported. Yeah. And, depending on how far they go, some folks who are citizens could be denaturalized, depending on how far they go. So we're going to have to really close ranks around one another, especially in the Black community, communities of color. We got to embrace. And when I say embrace, I don't mean just embrace the people who go to the same church as you, or even who don't go to church, or who are Muslim, or who gay or lesbian. We got to embrace everybody, because that's the only way we win. Right. Their biggest, best tactic, talking about messaging, is pitting us against ourselves. Right. And if we can just ignore that, like, nope, that's my brother, I got him. That's my sister, I got her. That's it in the story. Then we will be fine through 2026, 2028 and beyond. But if we get caught up in, I know it's not true, but if we get caught up in the Willie Lynch of it all, then this is going to be a very hard 4 years.
And Attorney Smith, I'm going to circle around positive just like you. I'm going to give y'all two things that I want y'all to check out. Reverend Barber is amazing.
Yeah, he North Carolina.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's got this group called Poor People's, I think it's Poor People's Alliance.
Campaign.
He is amazing. I think it's the Democrats that supported him and latched on. They could have used his ground work and his ground level work and have churned out more poor people who probably didn't vote to vote, and that might have made some of a difference. But he's amazing. The other thing I'm going to share with you guys, and I think everybody should look at, and I don't care what color you are, I think everybody can benefit from this. Dr. Joy DeGruy, she wrote, she is amazing. She has written a book called Slavery Traumatic, Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. And she talks about it on the level of how it affected enslaved people, but as well white people, and why they are still doing the things that they're doing and why they feel like they're not the same as their ancestors, because they switched the game up and they conditioned their generational people to treat us pretty much the same way, but just in a more modern time. So it's not genetic, it's generational trauma for both white people and Black people, but different. That we're perpetrated as the victim all the time. We're treated as, the ones that get the bad end of the stick. But the white people also learn how to disassociate themselves from being bad people by the things that they learn and carry on. It's an amazing read. She has a video out that she did a lecture in 2008. It's amazing. It was 2008, and we're still dealing with that now. 2008 is an hour and 20 minutes long. I think it's worth an hour and 20 minutes of people's time just to listen to her talk. She's amazing.
Yeah, what's her name again?
Yeah, could you give
Joy DeGruy, and it's DEGRUY.
Thank you.
It's called Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. She's even written a book. So you can get the audio book if you want and just listen to it while you do something else. She's just amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that plug. And I guess I'll kind of chime in here with some of my closing positive thoughts. You mentioned church a second ago, Attorney Smith. I think faith plays a big role in how we're all going to get through 2025, whatever your faith is. But have faith in something, even if it's just your family, friends, or your community. We've got to keep the faith. We have to have hope. And hope is, that first step. But we do have to strategize and organize. And so don't hear me as saying that we don't need to plan. But I think oftentimes, especially for Black folks, when we're tired, we can lean on our faith. We can lean on our community and our family and friends. And so don't count out the power of that. I'll also say that one of my favorite scriptures these days says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And so when we see all of this fire, where we see all of this massive and extreme disasters in the form of hurricanes and tornadoes and others, understand that it is important that we each take care of this earth, right? Climate change and global warming are real. Attorney Smith mentioned that earlier. And so we can each do our part to make sure we're caring for our communities, picking up trash. There are simple things we can do that really do make a large difference. And then I'll end by saying, I always choose a word of the year. And this year I chose the word live, L-I-V-E. And I went down to definition 8 of Merriam-Webster. So see, Gen Z still looks at dictionaries. I'm down on definition 8 of Merriam-Webster's dictionary, which says life or living is to have a life rich in experience. And so I think that's something I'm leaning into. I want to have a rich experience this year, even with all of the uncertainty and anxiety that's going to come. And so I think other young people are with me. We're going to live this year. And so, hey, maybe I'll go trademark that project Staying Alive, because that's what I plan to do. Thank you, Pam.
That's right. That's right. That's all right. Well, listen, guys, I have enjoyed you. And people, if those that are listening, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have found out that my that LinkedIn, everything changed in the new year. LinkedIn, if people were making comments on LinkedIn, it didn't transfer over to the StreamYard. So I don't know what's going on there, but I guess you can still hear the show from LinkedIn, but I can't see any comments that you guys might do from there. But I just want to thank everybody for participating. Please share the video. Share the video so that we educate more people, get more people thinking and talking, and being encouraged, not defeated, and knowing that we can do this again. And if you're listening, and if you're a political operative, if you're running for office, thinking about running for office, contact me with the on the email on the scroll here. I want to hear from you. You can be on the show. We're trying to grow the channel and just grow in general. Okay. All right. Let's say good night, everybody. Let's wave everybody good night. We went a whole hour over.
Other thing I'm going to say, Pam, and if you can't remember how to get on her YouTube, you can always go to one of our Facebook pages and it's there because I've shared the link. So that's another way to get on to her YouTube. Come on, you guys, you can do this.
All right. All right. Good night. Good night,
Good
everybody.
night. Good night.
Good night. Thanks.